These two guys actually did an evaluation of Eastern Partnership use window. So they are evaluators, they are not decision makers. So if they cannot tell you what's happening next with Eastern Partnership use window and so on, please don't touch them physically. We already know that this work is there. People in Commission are thinking what to do, how to do, and some news might come in some future, which we don't know yet. So, floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. So once again, hello everybody. To those who I had no chance until now to talk directly. My name is Behrooz, and I was in charge of doing this evaluation together with my colleague Max. We were hired by a company called IBF, who got a contract from the DEFCO, DG DEFCO, in order to evaluate the Eastern Partnership Youth Window, which was actually created in order to address some needs which have been identified in 2011 through the program. So in general, the program had following objectives. One of them was about addressing young people, socio-economic needs of young people in Eastern Partnership region. The second was about improving understanding and awareness about youth work in this context, and also to enhance I have to look here, exchange of good practices in through the program, and also to increase regional cooperation in Eastern Partnership region. Specific focus was given as a priority of the window to supporting the needs and of young people with few opportunities, especially from those from rural and deprived urban areas. So these were actually the main elements of the window, next to the elements of the Youth in Action program as well, but which made a little bit also, of course, this window different than the Youth in Action program. So in this regard, we got also the task to look during this evaluation in clarifying a very important question. Was the window a good tool to address these issues which have been identified? And if it was good, why? And if it was not good, what did not work well? As you know, the program was implemented in two different ways. There were two methods of implementation. One centralized. Organizations from the region could apply directly to Brussels and receive grants. And also at decentralized level, which was implementation through the national agencies in all the program countries. We started our work at some time in July, and we had actually a process of about 20 weeks based on different phases, 4 different phases, with plenty of activities that we have implemented in this regard, and I'm not going now to explain exactly what we did, but there were, as you see, there were lots of reports after each phase that we had to provide to the DG DEFCO, and discussing the further steps with them, and also taking further steps. In total, we had the chance to have a look, in some cases very direct look, a very deep look into each project. About 96 projects, we really looked very deeply inside and also had interviews. We had focus groups with about 240 people. We had different kind of direct interviews with organizations, with stakeholders, with ministries, and so on during that time. And we had an online survey which was sent to 938 projects, and we received in total something around 1,300 responses. Not from projects, but also from participants and organizations and so on and so on. And we had this moment that we could, of course, not look at all national agencies, so there was a focus on 3 national agencies, Germany, France, Poland, and UK, because these 4 national agencies were those who have implemented the most of the activities. Again, the 4 phases, I'm just skipping this part. Different kind of tools were used in order to collect the data for the purpose of this evaluation. And now I'm going to give over to my colleague, who is then going with the conclusions, and I will continue later with the recommendations.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take you briefly through the specific conclusions of the evaluation process. We focused on a few key areas with regards to what the window has achieved. We looked at the objectives, priorities, implementation, monitoring, ownership, and unintended impacts of the window beyond of what's been planned by the Commission. What I'd like to do is to present briefly the key conclusions with regards to each of those areas, and to give you some keywords and maybe a few simple statistics to illustrate how those responses work. So the first bit of information with regards to the window's relevance to its objectives and priorities was that the window has successfully addressed most of its planned objectives and significantly contributed to addressing the socio-economic needs of young people in the region. And some areas of interest to young people and areas that have been highlighted by young people are those where the window's impact was highest, was active participation and active citizenship, and other areas such as intercultural learning and mobility as key benefits and impacts of the window. And you'll be pleased to note in this particular context and during this event that the notion of employability and youth empowerment was also highlighted as the key impact of the window. Now, moving on, when it comes to addressing the needs of young people with fewer opportunities, as most of you would know, that was one of the main priorities of the window. What the evaluation has shown is the number of young people with fewer opportunities directly reached by the window was rather low, notably with reference to 2 specific groups that the window was intended to target. That's young people from rural areas and deprived urban areas. What the window did, though, is supported young people with fewer opportunities through indirect measures, such as capacity building, training, and networking projects, and one particular form of activity that was highlighted through local beneficiaries, notably EVS projects taking place in Eastern Partnership countries. I know a lot of you here have been involved in those. They were highlighted as particularly impactful in terms of reaching out to young people with fewer opportunities, as a lot of those projects happened in deprived urban areas and in rural areas. Moving on to the window's impact on youth work. It was one of the key priorities of the window. What the evaluation results have shown us is that the window has clearly enhanced awareness about the nature of youth work to a very high extent throughout all Eastern Partnership countries. What the beneficiaries have reported, and also governmental stakeholders, that the window was the largest funding instrument in the field in most Eastern Partnership countries, with the exception of Azerbaijan, where significant funding was and is made available by the government. Now, training and networking projects have been identified as key instruments for sharing good practice and increasing awareness about the nature of youth work. And you will notice in further statistics that there was a very high interest in organizing those in Eastern Partnership countries. And what's good to highlight is that 2 areas have been indicated as key to a successful impact of European youth projects in the region: developing local capacities, so working with local organizations at local area, and strengthening national structures dealing with youth policy and youth work. Now, when it comes to another key priority of the window, regional cooperation, this was mostly reported as a low priority for a lot of beneficiaries in the region. That refers to both centralized and decentralized projects. The definition of regional cooperation combining 3 Eastern European countries with South Caucasus countries was not seen as a key priority. The beneficiaries that we talked to were not particularly averse to this priority, but they just didn't indicate it as an issue that's very high on their work agenda and in terms of response to the needs of young people. What also became apparent during the evaluation process is that there is an acute need for new mechanisms of support to fulfill the EU Association Agreement criteria. That's with reference to 3 countries of the region that have signed the association agreement, that all contain respective youth and youth work-related chapters, and the will on the ground was to tie European programming in the area of youth to what the association agreements concern. Now, looking at capacity development for future cooperation, we noted with interest that the window has increased the cooperation between EAP, so Eastern Partnership, and EU-based organizations in the field of youth. I also provide an illustration of the fact that many more organizations have expressed interest in the cooperation as a result of the window and the opportunities it offered. What has been reported is that Youth in Action, the window is part of it, and now Erasmus Plus and its youth tier are the main sources of funding for cooperation activities in the field of youth in the Eastern Partnership region. Now, looking at a few numbers and how the window operated, so the mechanics of the window, we compared the window's centralized activities, so those whereby Eastern Partnership beneficiaries applied directly to the executive agency in Brussels, with decentralized activities. As Behrooz already mentioned, we focus on the 4 national agencies, so the statistics you will see here pertain to projects funded either by the executive agency or by the British, the German, the French, and the Polish national agencies. This is not the full picture. For that, you have to read our evaluation report, which is already online. Right, so when it comes to how the window's funding was used, what was highlighted by the beneficiaries and then what we highlighted in the report was that there was a disbalance in the use of funding between the centralized and decentralized methods. If this thing can show you a bit of a background to this, if you look at the decentralized activities, so far activities funded by national agencies, at least the 4 that we looked at, you could see that the majority of projects were EVS projects. And when it comes to projects funded by the executive agency, majority of activities were training and networking projects. That's a comparable number. So over half for ECEA training and networking projects, over half for national agencies and EVS projects. So what we noted was there was uneven distribution in terms of type of activity by funding source. What was also noted was the disbalance in the geographical distribution of the Windows activities across the region. As you could see, 2 countries stand out, as Georgia and Armenia, in terms of numbers of projects that have been implemented within the window. Again, those statistics are only for the executive agency and the 4 respective national agencies. The numbers will be higher if you include projects implemented through funding received by through other national agencies, but you would see quite high numbers for Georgia, Armenia, and then other countries benefiting from a smaller number of projects and smaller overall amount of funding. Now, what was interesting to note for us that there was no significant difference between the centralized and decentralized method of implementation in terms of the project's efficiency. There were substantial differences when it comes to the administrative burden on the applicant or beneficiary or EAP partner, because there were different setups for centralized and decentralized methods of implementation. There were differences with regards to ownership, and I'll talk about this as well, and how projects were or were not sometimes monitored. Now, monitoring was another area we looked at when we noted, having discussed the monitoring programs with all the funding agencies, with the Commission's bodies and with the national agencies, was that there were limited capacities and important financial constraints on how to monitor projects, especially those happening in Eastern Partnership countries. So some of those projects that we're referring to happened in program countries, and they were to an extent monitored, especially by national agencies, but when it comes to projects in EAP countries, there was rather little monitoring. There were different monitoring procedures applied, different bodies were involved, including some national agency mechanism, but with a limited scope, some executive agency monitoring, but also very limited in its scope, and some what you could call de facto monitoring by SALTO in Eastern Europe and in Caucasus. Okay. Now, when it comes to the window's impact and how effective it was, what we noted through the results received through the different tools that Behrooz mentioned, including the online forum that participants have filled, interviews, focus groups, was that the window contributed to personal and social development of the target groups, of the young people in Eastern Partnership region, to a very high extent. That was the answer reported consistently throughout the different tools that we used, and high achievements were noted, particularly in the areas of active participation. So if you remember the first slide I mentioned, active participation was highlighted as the area where the program had most impact. Then areas such as self-esteem or personal gains, such as self-esteem, practical life and soft skills. You would also note that employability is there, but it's not among the highest impact areas. Now, when it comes to ownership, it wouldn't come as a surprise to people in this audience, I understand, that ownership of the projects was very high, especially in the context of projects funded by the executive agency, whereby Eastern Partnership-based organizations applied directly and managed the funding by themselves, whereas for the decentralized methods, where national agencies and partners in program countries, were involved, and the ownership was reported as lower. All beneficiaries that we had the pleasure to meet during our tour of the region reported that the centralized method of implementation, so the possibility of applying directly to the executive agency, is a preferred way of cooperation, has the most positive impact on local beneficiaries and their capacities, on recognition of youth work and volunteering, which are important impacts of the window. Now, what we also looked at certain side effects of the window, and we noted that both beneficiaries, so civil society organizations and governmental institutions, and also international organizations in the region, noted that the window contributed to strengthening of civil society in Eastern Partnership countries, especially because the beneficiaries of the window have very diverse profiles, deal with very diverse target groups. Some of them were specifically working with certain groups of young people. Some of them had a broader outlook. Some of them work with civil society development in general. And the window had a great impact on what they could do because of all the opportunities it offered. What the window did is contributed to legitimizing youth work and youth policy as a credible and important actor of civil society, which is not the universal message heard in all Eastern Partnership countries. And what it did also is it significantly increased the capacity of youth sector organizations to deal with project management, to deal with grants, to deal with international donors, and in many cases has led recipients of Eastern Partnership Youth Window funding to receive grants of larger magnitude from other donors. So it significantly increased their financial and management capacity. That's it when it comes to specific conclusions. I'll pass on to Behrooz.
Thank you very much. So with regard to the conclusions, actually, they are very much based on these findings that we had under each item. Well, one important recommendation would be that clearly that youth work has really played a very important role and should also continue in this way in the framework of a new program, youth work and voluntary and civil society sectors. Supporting them and focusing on them should be a core part of the new program. Second recommendation would be definitely that as it was identified in the framework of the evaluation, young people with fewer opportunities were not clearly targeted, and sometimes we had the feeling that they were just a little bit about ticking boxes instead of really addressing young people. So there should be more focus on that in the framework of assessing and approving projects which have clearly directly involving young people with few opportunities. So it is clear that it is impossible to have total and only focus on this group, but 1/3 of the projects should probably have this focus. The third recommendation would be that the continuation, the window was a good thing. In total, it was very much appreciated, and there should be also a continuation of the window if it is possible, of course. If there is any framework existing that can support the window under the Erasmus+, which is, we are not talking anymore about Youth in Action program, we are talking about Erasmus+, which is another program with other features. And, but however, it should be complementary to other funding opportunities. It shouldn't be the only standing alone support program. Another recommendation would be that the new program should have, should include a provision for local project opportunities. It was very often mentioned in the meetings and in the interviews, in the focus groups, that we have received a lot of support through the program, but we have no opportunity to actually implement it on the spot in the Eastern Partnership, because there is no possibility for us really to do youth work in the region. So what we are doing is only in the international context. So there should be also support in this regard. Also focusing on national priorities. All the countries in the region have started clearly to develop and further improve their national policies in the context of youth, and there should be also focus on that in supporting this. And of course there is a very, very strong need for coaching and monitoring, which was also identified as a problem. And all this should target those, especially those groups of young people who could not be or cannot be probably in the future also reached clearly by Erasmus Plus activities in significant numbers. 4 and 4. No, this is recommendation 5, and that means yes, all of this should also be followed and supported by a comprehensive cross-sectoral cooperation strategy that also includes other stakeholders, ministries in different sectors in the cooperation. How it is going to happen, we also don't know exactly, but there should be a component, there should be some possibility in looking to synergies, to possible achievements, to institutions which already exist, and to bring them together under a new program. We have identified actually 3 kind of components for the new program. Whatever is possible to implement in this regard. First of all, and this is actually one of the key issues that for us was very important, that there should be local capacity building available on the spot and development programs through grants. So this is something that we believe is very much necessary in the region to have a combination of grants and sub-granting, to create demand-driven NGO cooperation, to offer a sub-granting facility at micro level, for example, like possibly youth initiatives, and so on. So to not only to work on international level, but really also to have some impact at national level, at local level, at rural level. The second component would be, of course, also the opening of a window under Erasmus+. We here were thinking that key action 2, especially capacity building in the field of youth, which includes also youth exchanges, trainings, and EVFs, would be a good choice, because under key action 1, as far as we knew at that time, it was not possible to have direct involvement of NGOs in the region. Geographical repartition according to country population size should be considered in the new program, because this is also very important. As you saw already, Georgia had a lot, Armenia followed by Armenia, but a huge country like Ukraine has a very, very small, not small, but it was on the 3rd place, and followed by Belarus, which was just involved with 4 projects at centralized level. For some reason, definitely also for some political reason that were behind that, but and also there is another issue related to the equal status for countries who have signed the agreement, association agreement. So there should be a little bit of appreciation, of course, also concerning these countries and this this aspect, this political aspect, which is also very important for the governmental bodies as well as for the young people involved in this program. The component 3, management, monitoring, policy coordination facilities. So all these things should be coordinated, of course, by somebody. And the body should, can be definitely a technical office, assistant office, or in other hands, we have actually also lots of very, very competent and very interesting partners and synergies in the region already, SALTOs, national agencies, and so on, which could be also considered as a body for the implementation of such kind of, and monitoring especially of such kind of program. Also in order to tailor the policy support and ensure a broad use of synergies, and also improve the cooperation with Erasmus Plus offices in Eastern Partnership region. We have Erasmus Plus offices in the Eastern Partnership region which may also have some stake in terms of better promotion of the program. Something what we have found out also was that the program was very much known in, let's say, capitals, but wherever we went a little bit out of the city, no one ever heard about it. So this is really something that might be also taken into consideration, who could do that and how it could be done. So the time is telling me that I am out of my time, 34 seconds, which is good. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Behrooz. It's lovely to have such a self-reflective, self-time managed presenters who don't take extra time. Thank you very much. Link to the full evaluation is given to where? In which website?
You can actually Google it, because I also don't know the link. The link is a bit complicated, but just Google evaluation, Eastern Partnership Youth Window.
Or Max
That's it, and you will find it in Google as a first place. It happened to me at least.
And I imagine we
and
can
you
also
have
put
it
it
in
on
90 pages, very nicely written with
we'll also
full
put
color.
it in our Facebook page, and maybe Max, before that, for those people who are impatient, you can tweet it.
Yeah, I can tweet it as well, yes.